there's a lot of research still being done on this. I wish I had a definitive list. I mean, I think a lot of these things that we're discovering about foods, testing and research is still ongoing. And so like a single list that works like a calorie list is not really available. We don't have like an average, right? But generally speaking, aged meat will have a higher histamine. And that's not because the meat's going bad. That's because that's a normal process. The meat, when it's exposed to air and oxidizes, it tends to create histamine. There's no taste to it. There's no smell to it. So it's not about the meat going bad. It's just the aging process encourages this conversion in the meat. For a lot of people who need to look at histamine, they'll need to look at buying as fresh as possible with any kind of animal product. And on the other side of that, once you've cooked meat, you will still get this process where histamine's being generated. And so I think of it a bit like a histamine clock. And if you're going to slow that down, freezing is your best way to do it. So if I buy fresh, I cook as quickly as possible, or I buy fresh and freeze as quickly as possible. Then when I'm cooking, I'm going to freeze again after the cooking process as quickly as possible. All you're trying to do is shut off that clock as much as you can so that you're not developing more of it. Intriguingly enough, some people do very poorly with plant-based histamine, and do okay with meat-based histamine. So somebody like me, who's also dealt with the histamine aspect here, I don't really have to worry too much about meat that's aged or anything like that. I'm fine. And I do have other clients where they have the same thing. So there's this odd thing with histamine that it may depend on the source for anybody's particular situation. So some people can't handle plant-based histamine, some people can't handle meat-based histamine, and some people have to manage both. The more unwell you are, the more likely you're in the I have to manage both category. And plants that have high histamine. So the biggest offenders here, and again, we're going to hit ones where people are not going to like me. So chocolate's high histamine.
See ya, listeners, for the third time that we've talked together.
I apologize. I'm sorry. Tomatoes are high histamine. Not so much the histamine in the tomato itself, but it seems to act as a histamine liberator, which is another category in foods. I don't think anybody will cry too much that spinach is high histamine. I think they'll be fine with that.
Darn.
So it's not a perfect overlap with oxalate by any stretch of the imagination. When it comes to patterns in histamine, it's this aging, fermenting, those kinds of things tend to naturally be higher in histamine. So, a fermented kimchi, which might normally be fine because it's cabbage, I would avoid it if you've got a significant histamine issue. But like many things, it's a threshold phenomena too.
Yeah.
So the highest histamine things, maybe the only things that you need to take out of your diet in order to take some pressure off your system. But yeah, it tends to be a lot of the same kinds of challenges with a threshold and data and those kinds of things. But tomatoes, chocolate, fermented things, there are some sort of funny selections of things that end up higher histamine. Kale's higher histamine. Again, I don't think anybody's going to cry over that.
Nope, absolutely not.
But some of the berries are higher histamine. That's a sad one for a lot of people. Especially if they're eating low carb, strawberries are a little higher histamine. So you might want to stay to your blueberries and maybe raspberries, and some berries are really high in oxalate. So it starts to reduce some of your options there. Citrus tends to be a histamine trigger. So some people will find that they need to go away from too much citrus, or maybe they need to avoid it completely. Some people are so sensitive, it can be an avoid completely thing. And some people may find that as a temporary tool, though, that it really helps them to just manage some of this histamine and tend towards lower histamine options. And then like later they may be able to open up their diet again so that it's just low oxalate. Honestly, at this point in my life, there's so many options that we've had tested that are lower oxalate. I don't even think twice about some of the difficulties, like chocolate, but I've learned about some of the alternatives. There's something on the market, which is sometimes hard to get, but I think I found a supplier again called Maya nut powder, Maya nut. And it's not a full blown chocolate, but it gives you this nice chocolate, almost cappuccino kind of flavor. And it's okay from the histamine standpoint. So, the nuances would take more time, but broad strokes, what really kills people are the tomatoes, because tomato sauces and tomatoes and all kinds of things, strawberries, chocolate, those are the ones that really, make people unhappy with having to reduce histamine.